Hello, everyone. Today I am here to talk about what has been going on Twitter and all the discussion about software tooling and scouting at DLC Indy this weekend. So I've got a breakdown here of things I'm going to be talking about, and the start of that is with some recommended links. So I would absolutely recommend you check out Tegan's video on uh, AI coding tools and the Duels API. This is an excellent breakdown of like how a lot of the stuff is being built and about some of the Duels specific implications. It also covers like recent history with various amounts of too much data being linked by Duels, including like full bit deck lists and match replays. I would also recommend this article from Bobby McHugh on scouting and scraping. It summarizes specifically some of the stuff that went on at DLC Indianapolis and is a great summary of things. And I recommend this article from Quigley about how to fix cheating in Disney Lorcana. That is a tangentially related issue to this. Neither scouting nor data scraping from Duels is cheating, but we do have an issue in this game with incentives and with how we handle them. So I would highly recommend reviewing all of those. You don't necessarily need to stop and watch them now before, but they will all be helpful in understanding some of the things I'm going to be talking about here. So first up, what is scouting? Scouting, most simply, players walk around the room, they make note of who is playing what, and they write it down so that they can review and confirm with like other people that they are scouting with, and make sure that, you know, when they sit down at a table later into the event, that they know what they're playing against before they sit down. How common is scouting? If you name a notable player in this game, 95% chance or better that they have engaged or regularly engaged in scouting at major events. This practice is super common. It is not unique to Lorcana. It is relevant in basically every game forever and all time. And it is simply a fact of life of competitive play for trading card games. There is a advantage to be gained in your matches by knowing what you are playing against before you sit down, and so players will be going to try and find that advantage. What does this look like? Scouting typically, traditionally, is just a spreadsheet. So this is actually a live sample of a sheet from DLC Ghent. I have blanked out the player names here for their privacy, but you know, you walk around the room, you note down like notable players, and you put down what colors they're playing and some notes about their matchup, right? So knowing if your opponent like has Crom in their deck or not, or if they have Sven, and whether you need to be worried about like questing into that on your turn 3. No Wasabi, right? No item break, or item break being present in purple steel, right? These are all sort of relevant notes that you might see on this thing. And yeah, this is, like I said earlier, pretty much everyone is going to be doing this. People don't typically talk about that, but as players start to get like more organized, they start forming teams, whether those are professional teams or whether those are sort of personal local teams with their friends. Everybody's scouting. I would even be skeptical of the people who might want to say, put their hand up and say like, hey, we don't scout. I'm not even sure I would believe that, because this is an extremely common practice. This is table stakes for playing like a game like this competitively. Everyone is doing this. Now, let's move on to software tooling. This is the sort of big area, I think, where people have gotten a lot of attention, or there's a lot of unanswered questions going on, particularly around like the relevance of this at DLC Indy this weekend. So I cannot speak for every piece of software that exists in the wild, although I am aware of tooling beyond what I have created. But what I can show you and talk about here is 2 pieces of tooling that I have personally created in roughly the last 6 weeks. The first is a scouting coordinator. So what is this? I called this the Lorcana Event Management Bot. This bot sort of was debuted at a CCQ a few weeks ago. The tournament organizer there had a conversation about it and requested that I pull it down. And then I have had further conversations with Ravensburger tournament organizers at DLC Indianapolis, where I've gotten a better understanding about where they believe the line to be on sort of what is acceptable and what is not acceptable. We'll cover some of those details on that later. But the event management bot, what does it do? It speaks directly to the RPH API, and it basically pulls a bunch of relevant information there for easier processing. It can ping you when your round goes up. It DMs you where your next match is going to be, and if your opponent's like scouting information is known. If it's not, when you finish your match, you just DM it what they were playing, and it records that. For people who are walking around the room scouting, it handles like sorting out, okay, which tables should you go find out? One question you might think about with scouting is like when you walk up to a table and you see two players playing, how do you know who's who if you don't know who the players are? One of the reasons to automate this is that you can just determine this algorithmically over the course of multiple rounds of reporting, right? If it's player A versus player B on table 1, round 1, and it's Blurple versus Purple Steel, you can note that down. And then if you come back in round 2 and it's player A versus player B and it's Blurple versus Green Yellow, well, now you know what all three of those players are doing. You can do this by hand. That's typically what you do. Or a bit of software can do this for you. And it can consider things like how many relevant tables could you confirm by looking at a single thing. Quick fire through here some of the other features, right? Just tells you when a round is nearly complete. I like to go to the bathroom before my next round is paired. That was one of the original reasons I built this, on top of not being able to usually get a good refresh on the RPH to find my match when they go up. You can have a ping out of like your round summary to your Discord or your friends for players who you're interested in their like seeing how they're doing. Top cuts like bracket breakdowning, so you know who if you win your top cut match, who is your next opponent, or if their match isn't done, like what table are they and who might they be. And ID math, so if you wanted to know, oh, what is the ID threshold going to be for like securing a locked spot in top cut at this event, that's pretty easy to do. Again, you can do that by hand, or you can just have a bit of software that does that for you automatically. So what does this actually look like? So the sort of original version of this was built off the RPH API. That was part of the issue with this at the CCQ. Turns out Carded.io terms and conditions says, do not use the API. You're not supposed to be doing that. So I was made aware of that at the event and stopped doing that. But here's an example of the kind of things that are available in the RPH API. Now, this is probably an area where there are unanswered questions, right? I've heard people suggest things like you can get deck lists from the RPH API. As far as I'm aware of, that is not possible. I have heard that that was at one point possible around DLC Milwaukee, but that it was then notified to RPH and removed. That extends long before I've started looking at any of this stuff, so I can't verify whether that's true or not. But I can say that, as far as I'm aware, the RPH API does not expose private player information such as deck lists. It generally just returns relevant stuff about the event. The name, when it was last updated, does it have like a day 2 phase or not? Where is it currently in the life cycle? What is its current round? Are the pairings generated? Have they been sent out? Are the standings generated? Is the round like in progress or complete? Yada, yada. It also has like registrations for like the number of players who are at the event, who they are. It has like matches. So when a round is in progress, you can get all of the matches that are in the round, right? Which players by ID are there, whether the match is completed or not, who won. Yada, yada, just, regular detail stuff here that is relevant for that. And then the standings, right? The standings that are actually generated and published at the end of each round are available via the API. And generally, you just use those 4 things and you can keep like a machine readable ready match state in your software. This is used by sort of other services and websites on the internet. To name a couple that are using this in some basic capacity to do things, Lorcana and Lorcana Hunter are both like getting this kind of information from the RPH API, right? That's like a normal use case for this kind of thing where you want to be able to get that data and display it to people otherwise. Next is the Duels.inc meta-analysis. So this is relevant for if you heard about people using something like this at Indy. The basic rundown there is there are other versions of this built by other people. That one included the ability to like look up a player's Duels name and see what decks they had been playing. Somebody used that during round one to scout their opponent. I guess their name matched their Duels name, and they went and checked their list. And then the person running that tool went and spoke to the head judge about that to ask them what they thought. The head judge said that from a legality perspective, it was fine, but that they strongly recommended that the tool be taken offline for the duration of the tournament, and so they did that before the start of round two. That tool does not necessarily look like this one, but they're both doing the same thing. They are doing game analysis based on Duels replays file. So what I've got here is like a data set of just under sort of 1,000 best of threes, and it's generating here like a meta share. This is then further split up by analysis I've done to help try and determine like what is an average, what do various lists look like when categorized into archetypes, right? So green, yellow, and Infinity has dogs, but it also has discard, and it also has like Snowfort decks. And these decks actually have like independent win rates, right? So you can see something like Duels is just going to tell you the overall win rate of Amber Emerald. But it's not necessarily going to tell you that, you know, Dogs has a winning win rate and Discard does not. Some other views on like the kind of thing you can see here, right? So you can see win rates by ink pairs. That's the thing you find on Duels anyway. Or you can sort of filter this by archetype or minimum game count to filter out the noise, and then do some analysis on like, okay, what looks the best? Oh, you know, this burn deck looks pretty good, but actually it only has like 40 games here, right? So maybe if we increase the number of games to 50 minimum, we can see like actually, you know, green purple discard looks like it's a pretty good deck, and it has some like specific positive interactions, and then you can even click on those to get like per matchup breakdowns. There's a tab for building a win rate matrix, assuming that people are just playing the good version of any of these lists. And this is a tab that's just like, what does this tool think that a list looks like, right? So this is basically saying like if I see like an Amber Steel No World list, these are the cards that are typically seen in them, like what percentage of lists that we think belong to this archetype are playing these cards, and in how many copies. You can see it's not perfect, right? It's the No World archetype actually has, you know, one deck playing one copy of A Whole New World. That's just what happens when you try and get these things to like run algorithmically. So, you know, what was the prevalence of these tools at DLC Indy? Based on stories that have been told to me by other players, I am personally aware of at least half a dozen unique tools being used by players at DLC Indy for like scouting primarily. That likely means that there are probably a lot more of these that I am not aware of, because that number doubled from like 3 to 6 as soon as this started becoming a topic of discussion and I started asking other people like what they had personally seen. So this is becoming an incredibly common feature of competitive play, right? Scouting has always been common, but scouting through like purpose-built software is now becoming a staple part of competitive play in Lorcana. And, you know, where does Ravensburger draw the line on this? So I got to have an opportunity to talk to, you know, senior tournament organization staff at Ravensburger at DLC Indy and ask them like pretty direct questions on like, what are your thoughts on scouting? What are your thoughts on like software automation tools? What is okay? What is not? What is covered by policy? And building software tooling is not against any of the written policy. Software tooling that only exists for things like outside of the event as well, like, you know, a Duels meta analyzer that doesn't give you opponent lookup information, is just fine, right? Like that's not a thing that concerns Ravensburger tournament running, and scouting as like a default practice is also fine. Again, talking to people at Ravensburger, like manual scouting, doing it in a spreadsheet, doing it the old-fashioned way, this is table stakes. There is no issue with that. Where they are concerned is that the power of software automation to be doing these things at like a more advanced and more efficient level is, in their opinion, against the spirit of tournament policy. So this is not currently in the written tournament policy in any meaningful capacity, but in like in-person discussions on this and asking directly, it is the opinion of like tournament organization that actually players should not be using software automation tools like this to do like scouting beyond what they could be doing with a pen and paper or a spreadsheet that is manually updated. And so what can we do about this? Well, the issue here really stems from incentives and reward. So right now, when you sit down to play a match of Lorcana, you do not know anything about what your opponent is playing. This is actually a bit of an oddity in modern TCGs. In games like One Piece, Riftbound, and Star Wars, when you sit down and you play your match, before you alter, you know what your opponent is playing. You know their colors in any of those games. And we don't have that. And so one of the ways that you can address this, if you don't think scouting is a good thing or you think it's sort of morally reprehensible and it should be removed, well, one of the ways you can do that is by removing the incentive to do it, by doing something like having open ink pairs or open lists to review before you play your match. This has become, like open ink pairs particularly, has become quite a common community calling point. And one of the reasons I think this is worth talking about is to suggest that, we would probably be better off if we removed the incentive for scouting by revealing additional information when you start your match, right? And now, this is never going to get rid of this practice entirely, but what it does is it levels the playing field broadly for the people who are doing this and the people who aren't doing this, and it reduces the incentive to participate and do this down to only the most dedicated of players who think they stand to gain further information by confirming things like specific card types or ink pair archetypes from their opponents. And the reality is, for 99% of scouting, that is not worthwhile for the players involved if the bulk of this is like something that is not what you have to look up. And so the best thing to do if you think scouting is immoral is to campaign for like finding a way to reduce its impact. Because there is functionally no way you can enforce against this as a blanket policy. To start with, that's not really of the opinion of the tournament people at Ravensburger that scouting is an issue by default, and that is unlikely to change given the sort of long-standing history of the practice and the relative fairness of the fact that anyone can walk around the venue and scout opposing decks that are out on the field that they see. But that means that it's hard to enforce between people who are doing this sort of within what is considered acceptable and players who are doing this outside of what is considered acceptable. Because the reality is, from an outside perspective, they look basically the same. Even from a functionality perspective, doing this like scouting with automation versus doing scouting by hand functionally is really not all that different. But it is, with the opinion of people I've spoken to, that the software element is where this goes over the line. That is something that we need to consider. How can you actually try and enforce that versus allowing what is acceptable or not having an effective way to distinguish between the two of those things? So I'm a strong proponent here that, opening ink colors is really the best solution to this. And if you want to see this practice like made less common or devalued, that is the thing I think we should be campaigning for in season 3.